I have cleaned blood off the floor of the Iron Court for 61 years. That is my work. I am not a soldier, not a noble, not a name anyone remembers. I am the one who comes after with the salt cloth and the long brush, when the great ones are finished being great and have gone to their feasts. So believe me when I tell you, I have seen things. I have seen a champion of the Drevi clans pull his own arm from its socket trying to move the maul, and then bow, and then thank the Emperor for the honor of failing. I have seen a Corvith war priest weep at the base of it, because he could not raise it past his ankles, and he had trained for 30 cycles, and his entire bloodline was watching from the upper galleries. I have seen the strongest creatures this galaxy ever made walk up to that hammer with fire in their chests and walk away small. None of them lifted it, not in my lifetime, not in my father's who cleaned this same floor before me. And then, on a gray morning that smelled of rain off the eastern terraces, I watched a human child do it. I am old now. My hands shake when I hold the cup, but I will tell you exactly what happened because there are people, important people, people with crowns and ledgers who have spent a great deal of effort making sure the story is told their way. And their way is a lie. So here is mine, the cleaner's version, the one nobody bothered to bribe. You have to understand what the mall was first, or none of this lands the way it should. They called it the Sundering Mall of Oundral. 500 tons of it near enough. The court masters measured it once and never measured it again, because the result frightened them. The head of it was a block of collapsed star metal, dark, almost wet-looking, like it was always sweating in the light. The haft was a single shaft of black alloy taller than 3 grown Corviths standing on each other's shoulders. There were old carvings up the length of it, worn down to nothing, the way a river stone gets worn. Nobody alive could read them anymore. The story went that the first emperor, the founder, the one whose statue you trip over in every plaza from here to the rim, lifted the mall out of a dead world's core with his bare hands, and that this was the proof of his right to rule. The proof that the Corvith were the chosen people of the dark between stars, the strong, the unbreakable. So every cycle, on the anniversary of the founding, they held the trial. Every subject species, every world the Dominion had ever swallowed, had to send a champion to the Iron Court. The champion would stand before the mall, in front of the Emperor and the full assembled court, and try to lift it. Nobody expected them to succeed. That was the whole point. You sent your strongest, your proudest, the best you had, and they failed in front of everyone, and the lesson was carved into your people one more time. You are nothing next to us. Bo, pay your levy. Send your sons to our wars. You are weak and we own you, and here is the proof, picked fresh every year. It was theater, cruel theater, the kind that dresses itself up in honor so nobody has to admit what it actually is. I had set the cloths out for 50 trials before the morning I am telling you about. 50. I knew the rhythm of it the way you know your own heartbeat. The champions came in waves. The crowd made the same sounds. Somebody pulled something, or fainted, or screamed, and I cleaned it, and we all went home. I thought I knew what that morning would be. The humans were new. You may not remember a time when humanity was new to us, but there was one, and it was not very long ago. They came up out of one of the garden worlds in the spiral arm, a wet, green, heavy little planet, the kind our survey crews used to mark as marginal and skip over. Too much gravity, too much weather. Storms that could flatten a city, oceans that could swallow a fleet, a sun that burned. The kind of place you don't colonize, the kind of place you write off. When the Dominion finally went down there, expecting to harvest a soft species of farmers, they got a longer fight than the reports admit. I have heard the soldiers talk, the ones who came back. They don't talk loud. They talk the way you talk about a nightmare you're not fully sure is over. But the Dominion always wins eventually. It has more ships, more bodies, more patience than anyone. So humanity was brought in, made a subject people, given a number and a levy and a seat, a low seat, a bad one at the great table. And that meant they had to send a champion to the trial. I remember the talk in the servants' halls the week before. Everyone was curious. Humans were small, we'd heard. Soft-skinned, no scales, no plates, no proper claws. They came up to about a corveth's chest, the big ones. The court was placing bets, quiet ones, on how badly the human champion would humiliate itself. Some said it wouldn't even be able to wrap its little hands around the haft. Some said it would weep. The favorite joke was that the humans would send a corpse, because at least a corpse wouldn't have to feel the shame. I didn't bet. I never bet. When you clean up after the powerful, you learn early that laughing at the weak is a habit that comes back around to find you. The morning came in cold and wet. I want you to feel the room, because it matters. The Iron Court is enormous, a hall so big that the ceiling disappears into shadow, with a single great shaft of light coming down through the open crown of the dome, where the rain that morning came down with it in a thin gray mist. The mist fell all the way down, the whole height of the hall, and landed on the dais in the middle, where the mall stood. It made the star metal head shine. It made the floor slick, which was my problem, not theirs. The galleries went up and up, ring after ring, packed with nobles and officers and the high castes of a dozen conquered peoples, all of them in their finest, all of them there to watch other people lose. The smell was incense and wet stone and the oil they rub into ceremonial armor. There was a low sound under everything, thousands of bodies breathing, shifting, murmuring, like surf, like the sea on that heavy green world maybe, though I didn't know that yet. And up at the head of it all, on the high throne carved out of a single asteroid, sat the Emperor. Tasek Vorn IX. I will not pretend he was not a magnificent thing to look at. He was old for a corveth, which means he was vast. They keep growing their whole lives, the way old trees do, and his plates had gone the deep bronze of age, and his crown was a ring of the same star metal as the maul, so that when he sat above it, it looked like the hammer was his and always had been. He had a way of sitting very, very still and letting everyone else fill the silence with their fear. I had cleaned that hall under 3 emperors. Vorn was the coldest, not the cruelest. His grandfather took the crown for that, but the coldest. He did not enjoy hurting people. He simply did not register them. To him, a champion failing was the same as a tide coming in, a fact of the world, beneath comment. The trial began the way it always began. The herald called the species in order of their conquest. The Drevi sent a brute with arms like cannon barrels. He heaved and roared and got the maul's head perhaps a hand's width off the dais before his legs went and he collapsed, and the crowd made its polite, hungry sound. The Sashin sent a champion who didn't even try to lift it with muscle. They're a clever people, but with a frame of leverage and pulleys he'd smuggled in, and the masters tore it down and had him whipped from the hall for the insult. The crowd liked that one more. One after another they came. One after another they failed. I stood in my alcove with my cloths, waiting for the ones who'd bleed, watching the light fall and the rain fall and the great ones lean forward and back like a single animal that fed on shame. The humans were last, lowest seat, newest leash. There was a stir when their delegation came forward, because of how few of them there were, and how plain. The other peoples had come in crowds, retinues, banners, war priests, drummers. The humans were a knot of maybe 9 in gray, no banner at all. They had the look of people who had been told to come, and not told they were allowed to bring their pride. At the front of them was a man. I will call him the Father because that is what he was, and because I never did learn the human way of saying his name properly, and I would rather not get it wrong now, this late, after everything. He was not a big man, even for a human. He walked with a limp he was clearly trying to hide, and he held one arm close against his body in a way I knew very well. I have seen 1,000 wounded creatures hold 1,000 broken ribs exactly like that. His face was gray under the brown of it. He was sick or hurt, or both, and he had come anyway, and he was standing as straight as the pain would let him. Behind him, half hidden in the gray of the others, was the child. I almost didn't see him. He was small even for a human child, 8, 9 of their years, I learned later. Dark hair stuck flat to his forehead from the mist. Big eyes, the way children's eyes are too big for their faces. He was holding the edge of the father's coat with one hand, the way little ones do, and he was looking up at the mall with his mouth a little open, and he did not look frightened of it. That was the first strange thing. Everyone is frightened of the mall. Grown warriors of conquering races walk up to it with their hearts hammering. This child looked at it the way you'd look at a mountain, with wonder, not fear, wonder. I noticed because noticing is my whole life. Nobody else noticed. Why would they? He was a child in the back of the lowest delegation of the newest slaves. The herald called the human champion forward. And the father took a step toward the dais. And then his leg buckled. It was not a small thing he was trying to hide, you understand. It was a real wound, a deep one, and the cold and the long standing had stiffened it, and when he tried to put his weight forward to walk to the mall, the leg simply would not hold him. He went down on one knee on the wet stone with a sound the whole hall heard, that flat slap of a body hitting floor. The murmur in the galleries swelled. This was good theater. This was better than they'd hoped. The new slaves had sent a cripple, and the cripple had fallen before he even reached the test. I saw the human delegation close around him. I saw a woman among them, older, hard-faced, try to get under his good arm to lift him. I saw him push her off gently and try to rise on his own and fail again. His face when he failed the second time is a thing I still see sometimes when I cannot sleep. It was not pain. He could bear pain. You could tell that just by looking at him. It was something worse than pain. Because here is the part the official story leaves out. The rules of the trial are old and they are exact, and one of them is this. A delegation that presents no champion that fails to make the attempt is judged to have refused the trial. And refusing the trial is refusing the dominion. And the punishment for that is not for the champion. It is for the people. A levy doubled, or a city emptied, or a generation of sons taken for the war fleets. The masters get to choose, and they choose to remember. So the father wasn't trying to stand because of his pride. He was trying to stand because if he didn't reach that hammer and lay his hands on it and make the attempt, even an attempt that failed in one breath, his entire world would pay for it. The wet green world with its heavy gravity and its terrible storms. His home, his people, whoever he had down there. And his leg would not hold him. I watched a man try to stand up for his whole species and fail because of one bad knee, and I thought, with the flat certainty of someone who has seen 50 of these, that's the worst one yet. That's the one I'll remember. I was right that I'd remember it. I was wrong about why. The emperor spoke. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. The hall was built to carry it, and the hall did its job. Is this the strength of humanity? Vorn said. The words went out into the silence and came back off the far walls. A broken man on the floor of my court. The galleries laughed. Not loud. The careful, currency laughter of people laughing because the powerful made a joke. It rolled around the dome and came down through the mist. The father, still on his knee, lifted his head. He looked up the long stairs at the throne. And he said, and I heard it because I had drifted closer along the wall the way I do to be ready, and human voices carry better than ours in that hall, he said. Give me a moment, your radiance. I'll make the attempt. You cannot stand, Vorn said, bored, already looking past him the way you look past a tide. I'll crawl to it if I have to, the father said. And he meant it. You could hear that he meant it. He started to drag himself forward across the wet stone, one hand reaching, the bad leg trailing, toward the base of a 500-ton hammer he could not have lifted with both legs and 100 years of training, because no one could, because that was the entire point. He was going to crawl to the mall and put his hand on it and fail and probably die of the effort, so that the rules would be satisfied and his people would be spared. That was the plan. That was the best plan a wounded man had. I have cleaned this floor for 61 years, and I have never wanted to put down my cloths and walk out into the middle of a trial and stop something. I am not a brave creature, but I wanted to then. I wanted to go and help him crawl. I am ashamed that I didn't. I just stood in my alcove and watched, the way we all watched, the way watching is the great crime nobody ever gets charged with. And then the child let go of nobody's coat, because he wasn't holding it anymore, and he walked out of the gray knot of the human delegation and into the light. He walked past his father. He didn't run. That's a thing I want you to know. People tell this story now like the boy charged forward shouting. He didn't. He walked, the slow, careful walk of a child trying to do something grown-up and important and not be told to stop before he gets there. His shoes, they had shoes, soft ones, made small wet sounds on the stone. He stopped beside his father, who had frozen, half crawling, and was staring at him with an expression I cannot describe to you, because I do not have a child of my own, and I think you have to have one to make that face. The boy crouched down. He put his small hand on the father's shoulder, the good one, not the broken side, he knew which side, and he said something to him quietly that I did not hear. The father shook his head. Hard, no. The boy said it again. The father grabbed the boy's wrist with his good hand, and I saw the knuckles go pale with how hard he held on, and I heard him say, low and ragged, "No, no, you don't. You hear me." And the boy gently, so gently, took his own wrist back out of his father's grip. And he straightened up. And he turned to face the throne. He was so small in that light. The shaft of gray rain came down all around him, and the mall rose up behind him like a cliff, and he was this little dark-haired thing in soft shoes, and he tipped his head back to look all the way up the stairs at the emperor, and he said, in a clear, high child's voice that carried up into the dome the way only children's voices can, "I'll do it, I'm the champion, let my dad rest." The silence after that was the biggest silence I have ever heard in that hall, and I have heard a great many. And then Tasek Vorn the Ninth, Emperor of the Iron Court, Lord of 1,000 swallowed worlds, leaned forward on his throne of stone, and he looked down at the child, and the corner of his mouth, they have mouths, the corveth, hard and gray, the corner of it moved. He sneered. "He's just a child," the emperor said. He said it to his court, not to the boy. He said it the way you point out something mildly amusing. He half turned to the high nobles at his right hand and said it again, lazier. "It's just a child. Are humans so weak they send their young to do what their men cannot?" And the galleries laughed, louder this time, because the emperor was clearly enjoying himself now, and when the emperor enjoys himself, it is safe and even wise to enjoy yourself too. The laughter went around and around the dome. It came down through the mist and it landed on the boy. The boy did not move. He stood in the light and let it land on him, and he kept looking up at the throne with those two big eyes, and he waited, very politely, for the laughter to finish, the way a child waits for grown-ups to stop talking so he can say the thing he came to say. I was close enough now to see his hands. They were shaking, not much, a little, the way your hands shake when you are very frightened and have decided to do the thing anyway. That was the second strange thing. The wonder I'd seen on his face when he first looked at the mall, that was gone now. He knew what this was. He understood exactly where he was standing and who was laughing at him and what it would mean if he failed. He was not a fool. He was a frightened child who had done the arithmetic my father can't, so it has to be me, and come to the only answer that let his father live, and he was going to act on it with his hands shaking. I have seen a great deal of courage in this hall, almost all of it from people about to lose. I have never seen any like that. The father was weeping, on his knees on the wet stone, not making a sound, just tears. His face turned up at his son, his broken arm finally forgotten, both hands reaching a little way out toward the boy and then stopping, because what could he do? What can any of us do when the small ones decide to be brave? The emperor flicked one massive hand, the gesture for proceed, the gesture you'd use to tell a servant to clear a plate. "Let it try," Vorn said. "I find I am entertained." The boy turned around to face them all. Up close it must have been like standing at the foot of a tower. The head of it alone was bigger than he was, many times bigger, that dark, wet-looking block of dead star metal hanging there off the haft. The haft went up and up into the falling mist. 500 tons of the proudest object in the galaxy, the unliftable thing, the proof of who ruled and who knelt. And a 9-year-old in soft shoes walked up to it and looked at where his hands would have to go. The masters of the trial moved in then, the way they always do, to mark the attempt as official and to explain the rules to the champion. There is a thing they say, a formula, about laying both hands on the haft and the attempt being counted from the first true effort. The senior master, a tall Corvith in the white overrobe, an old one, near as old as me, bent down to the boy to recite it. And I saw something I did not expect. I saw the old master's face as he bent close to the child. He didn't look amused. Everyone else in that hall, 10,000 of them, was amused. The old master looked for one moment before he caught himself and went official again. He looked sorry. He looked like a creature who had explained the rules of this thing to a great many champions over a great many cycles and had watched all of them fail, and who was now explaining them to a small, frightened human child, and who knew, the way you know the weather, exactly how this was going to end. He said the formula. The boy nodded. The boy reached up. He had to reach up. The lowest part of the haft where a hand could grip was at the height of his chin, and he put both his small hands around the cold black metal. The hall went quiet again, that hungry quiet, 10,000 of the galaxy's finest leaning forward to watch a child fail. And here is where I have to stop the story for a moment, because here is where the official version and my version go their separate ways, and I want you to know that I know what they say. And I want you to know that I was standing maybe 20 paces away with a salt cloth in my hand, and they were not. They say the boy strained and could not move it, and the emperor showed mercy and let him go home. That's the version in the records. They say a lot of things in the records. What I saw was this. The boy gripped the haft. He set his soft-shoed feet on the wet dais. He looked for just a second back over his shoulder, not at the emperor, not at the laughing galleries, but at his father, kneeling there in his ruin with tears on his face. And the boy gave him a small smile, a real one. The kind of smile a child gives you to say it's okay. I've got it, even when nothing is okay and he has not got it at all, because that is what the brave small ones do. They comfort you at the worst moment. They turn around and comfort you. Then he faced them all. He set his jaw. I watched his thin little shoulders settle, watched his back straighten, watched him take one breath so deep I could see it lift his whole small frame. And he pulled. I'm going to leave you there for a moment. The way the boy left the whole hall there, gripping, breathing, the rain coming down, 10,000 creatures leaning forward, an emperor smiling on his throne, a father weeping on the floor, and one small human pair of hands closed around 500 tons of the unmovable. Because what happened next is the part they spent so much effort lying about. And it deserves to be told properly. He pulled. Nothing moved. Of course nothing moved. I want to be honest with you about that part, because the lie they tell later starts by pretending I'm lying about this. Nothing moved. A child pulling on 500 tons does what a child pulling on 500 tons does, which is nothing. The maul stood. The boy hung off the haft with his whole small weight, his feet leaving the dais for a moment, his arms straight and trembling, and the great dead star head did not so much as shiver. The galleries breathed out, a long, soft sound of satisfaction. There it was, the thing they came for. The boy would strain and fail like all the rest, only smaller, only sadder, and they would feel that warm, ugly warmth of being on the winning side of the world, and then they'd go to their feast. The emperor settled back on his stone throne, done with it already. His eyes had gone somewhere else. The old master in the white robe started forward to call the attempt finished and lead the child away. And the boy let go of the haft and dropped back onto his feet, and I thought it was over too. It was not over. He just changed his grip. You have to understand, I have watched 1,000 creatures fail at the mall, and they all fail the same way. They walk up full of fire, they grab it, they heave. It doesn't move. And in that first second of it doesn't move, something goes out of them. You can see it leave. The fire turns to panic, and the panic turns to shame, and from there it's only a question of how long before their pride lets them stop. That is the real test, not the wait. The wait is impossible. Everyone knows the wait is impossible. The test is the second after the wait, when the impossible looks back at you and you have to decide what you are. The boy, when the mall didn't move, did not let anything leave him. I was close. I saw his face. He had pulled with his arms the way a child pulls, the way you pull a stuck door, and it hadn't worked, and instead of the fire going out of him, I watched him think. This small, frightened 9-year-old, hands shaking, 10,000 enemies laughing, I watched him work the problem. I watched him look at where his feet were, and look up the haft, and shift his stance wider, and crouch down lower, and set his shoulder against the metal instead of just his hands. Where had he learned that? On the heavy green world, I learned afterward. They lived their whole lives at the bottom of a gravity that would crush half the species in that hall. They learn as bobbies how to lift things that are too heavy. Their grandmothers teach them not muscle, posture, legs, not arms, back straight, breath low. Lift with the whole earth pushing up through you, not with the meat of your shoulders. He was 9, and he had been taught how to lift like a human is taught how to lift. And a human is built and raised at the bottom of a deep, heavy well. And now he set himself the way his grandmother had shown him, low and square and patient, and he wrapped his hands around the haft again, and he stopped thinking of it as a thing to be jerked and started thinking of it as a thing to be raised. The old master had stopped moving. He was watching the boy's feet. I saw the old creature's eyes narrow, and I knew that look, because it was the look I must have had on my own face. The look of someone who has watched this 1,000 times and is, for the first time, watching something he doesn't recognize. The boy breathed, in slow all the way down. I watched his small belly fill with it. And he drove up through his legs. The haft moved. I need you to sit with that because I had to. The haft of the sundering maul of Oundral moved. Not much. The width of 2 fingers, maybe. The base of it ground against the dais with a sound, a low grinding groan of metal that had not been moved in living memory, and that sound went out into the hall and hit the silence like a stone into still water. The galleries didn't laugh anymore. I saw heads come up all around the rings. I saw nobles who had been turning to their neighbors stop with the words still in their mouths. The warm, ugly satisfaction in that room went cold so fast I felt the temperature of it change on my own skin, and I was 20 paces off. 2 fingers, the width of 2 fingers. It should have been impossible at 2 fingers' width as much as 2 miles. The masters had told us all our lives that no living thing could move it at all. And here was a child, soft-shoed, shaking, with the whole grinding weight of it shifting up off the floor because he had set his legs right and breath right and refused to let the fire leave him. The emperor sat forward again, slowly. The boredom was gone off his gray face and something else had come into it, and I did not like the something else because it was not surprise. Surprise would have been human almost. What came into Tasek Vorn's face was calculation. The boy held the 2 fingers' width for one breath. 2. His arms were locked. His back was a straight line. His face had gone red and then a frightening dark red, and his lips had peeled back off his small flat teeth. And a sound was coming out of him. Not a scream. Lower than a scream. The long, low grinding note of a creature pouring out every single thing it has. All of it. The bottom of the well. And then he dropped lower still, and he pushed again. The maul came up off the dais. The whole head of it. Off the floor. Hanging in the air, swinging the smallest fraction on the great haft, 500 tons of dead star held up off the ground of the iron court by a 9-year-old human child with his feet planted wide and his teeth bared, and tears now, running down through the dark red of his straining face, not from sadness, from the sheer animal effort of it, and he held it. He held it. The sound in the hall, I have tried for years to describe the sound in the hall and I cannot. It was not a cheer. Nobody cheered. It was the sound of 10,000 creatures making, all at once, the small involuntary noise you make when something happens that your whole life told you could not happen. A vast soft collective gasp, and then under it a rising murmur of pure animal disbelief that swelled and swelled, until the old master in the white robe turned to the throne with his arms spread, official again, and called out in the formula voice, ringing into the dome. The attempt is, the mall is lifted. And the father, I have to tell you about the father. He was still on his knees. He had stopped weeping because you cannot weep when you cannot breathe, and he was not breathing. He was just staring at his son holding up the unholdable thing, and his face, that face I told you I couldn't describe in part 1, the one I said you had to have a child to make. There was a new face on him now. It had terror in it, because his boy was a heartbeat from being crushed by the weight of a small mountain. And it had something else in it that was so much bigger than the terror that the terror just drowned in it. Pride is not the word. We don't have the word, I don't think. Not in my language, maybe not in theirs. It was the face of a creature watching the best thing he ever made do the bravest thing he ever saw, and knowing that whatever happened next, the universe had already shown him this, and the universe could not take this back. He was whispering something. I read it off his lips more than heard it. Put it down. Put it down, please, you did it, put it down. But the boy couldn't put it down. Not yet. Because here is the thing the boy understood that the laughing galleries hadn't, that even the masters in their white robes maybe hadn't, that I only understood watching it. The rules said lift. The rules did not say for how long. And a frightened, clever child who had crawled inside the arithmetic of saving his father and his world was not going to set that hammer down 1/2 second before he was sure past any master's argument, past any emperor's mercy or malice, that everyone in that hall had seen it and could never again say they hadn't. So he held it up, shaking, bleeding a little now from somewhere, his nose maybe, a thin dark line of it down to his chin, held it up in the gray falling light with the rain coming down through the dome onto his soaked dark hair, and he turned his head, 500 tons hanging off his arms, and he turned his head, and he looked up the long stairs at the emperor. He wasn't asking permission. I want to be very clear. A great many tellings of this have the boy looking to the throne to be released, to be told, well done, child, you may stop now. That is not what I saw. What I saw was a 9-year-old holding up the proof of an empire's whole lie and looking the emperor dead in the eye while he did it. Not asking, showing. He's just a child, the emperor had sneered. And the just a child was holding the sundering maul of Oundral over his head and looking at him. Then his strength went. It had to. He was 9. There is only so much in any well, even a deep one. I saw it go the way I'd seen it fail to go before, that thing leaving a body, except it wasn't his courage leaving. His courage never left. It was just his body reaching the floor of what a body can do. His arms began to fold. The great head of the maul began, terribly, to come back down. And in the half-second where it could have come down on him, where 500 tons could have folded that small, brave creature into the wet stone in front of his father and 10,000 strangers, the old master in the white robe moved faster than I have ever seen an old Corvith move, and got his own armored shoulder under the falling head, and roared, and 2 of the younger masters threw themselves in beside him. And between the 3 of them, they took the weight off the boy, and let it grind back down onto the dais with a crash that shook dust out of the dome, and made the rain mist scatter. The boy fell. Just fell, backward, out from under it. His legs were done. They wouldn't hold him any more than his father's would. He hit the wet stone on his back and lay there with his chest heaving like a bellows and his eyes open to the falling rain. And for one of the longest seconds of my life I thought he was dying. I thought he had spent the actual whole of himself. I had my cloths in my hand and I was already moving without deciding to. I did not reach him. The father reached him first. I will never forget how the father got to his son. He could not stand. We have established that. That's where this whole thing started. The man could not stand. So he did what the boy had been ready to do at the start of all this. He crawled. Broken arm, ruined leg across the wet dais, dragging himself with one hand toward his child, and he got there. And he got his good arm under the boy's shoulders and pulled him up against his chest. And the boy's head lolled and then steadied. And the boy was breathing, the boy was alive. The boy looked up at his father's face, and I saw this. I was close. I was right there with my useless claws. The boy smiled. That same smile. The "it's okay, I've got it" smile. Spent to the bone, blood on his chin. And the first thing he did with his face was smile at his dad to tell him not to worry. The father put his forehead down against the boy's wet hair, and his shoulders shook, and he made no sound at all. And around them, the whole iron court was on its feet. I told you nobody cheered when the mall came up. That was true. It was too strange, too fast, too much against everything for cheering. They cheered now. It started somewhere in the lower rings. The conquered peoples, I think, the low castes, the ones who had sent their own champions up those stairs for cycle after cycle to be humiliated for the emperor's pleasure. It started small and ragged, and then it caught, the way fire catches, the way it must have caught on the green world's terrible dry seasons, and it went up through the rings ring by ring until the whole vast dome of the Iron Court was a wall of sound. And it was not polite currency laughter anymore. It was nothing the emperor had given them permission to do. It was the roar of 10,000 throats that had just watched the unliftable get lifted by the smallest, lowest, newest, weakest thing in the room. Do you understand what that sound was? It wasn't only for the boy. It was for every champion who'd ever failed up there. It was the Drevi brute and the weeping Corvith war priest and the sashing they whipped from the hall. It was every grandmother on every swallowed world who'd ever been told you are weak. Here is the proof, Neil. The boy hadn't just lifted a hammer. He'd lifted the lie off all of them at once, and they felt it come off, and they made the sound creatures make when a weight they've carried their whole lives is suddenly, impossibly, gone. I was crying. A cleaner, 60 years on that floor, standing in his alcove with a salt cloth, crying like the rain coming down through the roof. And up on his throne of stone, the emperor was not cheering. This is the part they bury. The official record says the emperor rose and praised the boy's courage and declared humanity worthy, and welcomed them to the dominion as honored equals. And there is even a statue now, I'm told, in one of the Rim plazas, a tasteful bronze of a noble Corvith emperor laying a benevolent hand on a small human head. I was 20 paces away. Here is what Tasek Vorn IX actually did. He stood. The cheering faltered, a little, the way a crowd's noise always falters when the powerful stand. And he looked down at the boy in his father's arms, and at the maul grinding settled back on the dais, and at the three masters still catching their breath, and he understood. I watched him understand. His face did the cold arithmetic right there in front of me that the lie was out. That 10,000 witnesses had seen the proof of his empire's whole right to rule get raised over the head of a slave child, and that there was no putting that back in the ground, no master's formula, no edict that could unsee it. And his choice in that moment was not whether to be cruel. He had already lost the thing cruelty was protecting. His choice was whether to be cruel uselessly, in front of a court that had just remembered all at once that the weak could rise. He was cold, the emperor. I told you that in part 1. The coldest of the three I cleaned under. And cold is not the same as cruel, and that day, for the first time, I was grateful for it, because a cruel emperor would have had that child killed where he lay, witnesses or no witnesses, and damned the consequences. A cold one did the sum and saw what the sum was. So Tasek Vorn raised one massive hand, and the hall went quiet, and he said, "And these are the words, the real ones. I have held them 60 years, he said. The child has lifted them all." A pause, the whole dome holding its breath. What is held in his hands has been held by one other, the founder. Another pause, He was choosing each word the way you choose your footing on a slick floor. I named him weak. I was answered. That was as close as Tassac Vorn the Ninth ever came, in his whole long reign, to saying I was wrong. It is more than I ever expected from him. It cost him the world, and he paid it in 7 words because he could count, and he knew the price of the alternative. He did not embrace the boy. There was no benevolent hand on any small head. The statue is a lie like the rest. He simply turned and went out the high door behind the throne, and the cheering came back up behind him like a tide coming in over a thing that used to be a wall. They tried to take the boy after. Not roughly. There were masters and officials and a sudden swarm of nobles who an hour before would not have looked at a human, all of them wanting to be near the child, to be in the telling of it, to put their hands on the new thing. The father would not let them. He held his son against his chest on the wet floor and showed his teeth at anyone who came close. A wounded man on the ground, baring his teeth at lords, and the lords backing off, until the hard-faced human woman from the delegation and the others got around them both and made a wall of human bodies, and lifted the 2 of them up together and carried them out. The boy was awake by then, wrung out white but awake. As they carried him past my alcove, they came right past me. I could have touched him. He turned his head and he looked at me. At the cleaner, the one creature in that hall, maybe, whose face had nothing to gain from his. I don't know what he saw on me. The tears, probably, the old fool with his cloth. He smiled at me too. Just a small one, a tired one. The kind you give a stranger you'll never see again, that says nothing and everything. And then they carried him out into the gray, and the great door closed, and it was over, and the hall was emptying, and the floor was mine again. I cleaned the dais last, the way I always do, the important spots last. There was blood on the wet stone where the boy had lain, just a little from his nose. Human blood is red, did you know that? Bright red, redder than ours, almost the color of the dark red his face had gone at the height of it. I knelt down by the maul with my salt cloth, the way I had knelt by 1,000 spots of 1,000 champions' blood, and I started to clean it up, the way I'd cleaned all the others, because that is my work, that is the whole of my work. I come after and I make the floor clean for the next round of the great ones being great. And I stopped. I knelt there by the foot of the sundering maul of Oundral, the unliftable thing, with the rain coming down through the open dome onto my back, and I looked at that little smear of bright red human blood, and for the first time in 61 years, I did not want to clean a thing up. I wanted to leave it. I wanted it to stay there on the cold stone at the foot of the great lie forever, so that every champion who came after, every cycle, every emperor, would have to step around it on their way to the hammer and know what it was and whose it was and what it meant. I couldn't, of course. They'd have whipped me from the hall like the sashing, so I cleaned it. I am ashamed of a lot of my watching, all those years, all that standing in alcoves while the strong ground down the weak. I'm not ashamed of much that I did, but I am ashamed that I cleaned up that boy's blood, and I have carried it 60 years, and I am telling you now so that at least it is written somewhere true. I cleaned the dais, I folded my cloths, I went home. The Dominion is not what it was. You know that. You live in it. The trial stopped within 10 cycles, quietly, no announcement, they just stopped sending the heralds out. And one founding day there was no trial and there was never one again. Because how do you hold a thing whose whole point was to prove the weak stay weak after the weakest thing in the galaxy lifted the proof over its head in front of everyone? The peoples remembered. That sound they made in the dome, that didn't go away when the boy went out the door. It went out the door with them, to 1,000 worlds, in 10,000 tellings, and it has been getting louder ever since. And I am an old creature now, and I think I will not see where it ends, and I am glad, because I think it ends somewhere good, and I would rather die hopping than know. I never learned what became of the boy. I hope he grew up. I hope nobody made him into a soldier or a symbol or a statue. I hope he got to be a man on the green heavy world with his father and lift ordinary things, and teach his own children someday the way his grandmother taught him: legs, not arms, back straight, breath low, lift with the whole earth pushing up through you. I hope he forgot the iron court entirely. The brave ones deserve to forget. It's the watchers who should have to remember. People ask me, the few who know I was there, what the lesson of it is. The strong young ones especially, they want the lesson. They want me to say, and that is why the small must never give up, something they can carry into a fight. But I cleaned that floor for 61 years, and the lesson I carry is not about the boy's strength. It's about the sneer. He's just a child, the emperor said, and he was right. That was the terrible part, the part nobody wants. The boy was just a child. He wasn't a chosen one. He wasn't a secret weapon. He wasn't anything but a frightened 9-year-old who loved his father, who'd been taught how to lift by his grandmother, who did the arithmetic and found the only answer and acted on it with his hands shaking. There was nothing special about him at all. That's what should frighten the great ones in the end. Not that a hero rose. Heroes they can kill or buy or build statues of. What should keep them up in their stone thrones is the other thing. The simple, ordinary, bottomless thing. That any child, anywhere at the bottom of any deep heavy well, taught right and loved right and pushed far enough, any of them, might just be the one who reaches up and lifts the lie off all of us. He was just a child. That was never the weakness. That was always, always the whole of it.